October 11th, 1975. I watch television in a way I don't usually watch television, not as background, not as accompaniment to something else, but with focused, professional attention. Because NBC had advertised something called Saturday Night that the people I trusted about these things were saying I should watch. The host was George Carlin. The performers were mostly young, mostly unknown, mostly the kind of professionally peculiar that you find at the intersection of very smart and very willing to fail in public. Their names would eventually mean something. I won't list them all because you likely know them better than you know my films, and that's fine. That is absolutely fine. The culture produces what it needs when it needs it. What I want to tell you is what it felt like to watch. It felt like seeing something that was not performing respectability. I have been in show business for 30 years. I have been in a world that, for all its various countercultural affiliations, has a deep relationship with respectability, with the production of work that seeks and receives the approval of an establishment. The reviews, the awards, the institutional sanction. The work I've respected most has always been the work that existed in some productive tension with that establishment, that pushed against it, that said things that were not entirely safe to say. But even that work, even the best of it, was engaged with the establishment enough to be in tension with it. Saturday Night was not in tension with the establishment. It didn't acknowledge the establishment enough to be in tension with it. It was doing something for itself, for the people in that studio, for the people watching at home who recognized something in it the way you recognize a thing you thought only you knew. I recognized something in it. I recognized the impulse, the specific impulse to make something real, to say the thing that everyone in the room knows, but that the decorum of the medium has been preventing from being said. To be funny in a way that isn't careful. Harold Stein taught me that a greeting reaches the other person, and a sound reaches only the air between you. Saturday Night was reaching the other person. Let me tell you about September. September 1975. Clara leaves for college. I want to tell you this with the honesty it deserves, which means telling you that I did not handle the first week well, which is unusual for me. I handle most things with some functional degree of grace. I have had sufficient experience with change to develop a basic competence with it. But the first week after Clara left, I was not handling it with grace. I was handling it by not going into her room. Her room exists in our apartment in the specific way that a room exists when the person who organized it around their own presence has been removed from it. As a record. Everything in it is precisely where she left it, which is to say, not precisely anywhere. Clara's organizational philosophy, which I have known and loved and intermittently attempted to address for 18 years, holds that objects belong in the place where they were last used, rather than in any predetermined location, which means her room is a museum of her recent activity. A biology textbook open to a chapter about cell division, a half-finished letter to a school friend she hadn't mailed yet, a record on the turntable that I didn't turn over because I didn't know which side she had been about to play, and it seemed important not to make the wrong choice. The Beatles record, obviously. I stood in the doorway of her room on the Tuesday after she left, and I looked at all of it, and I thought several things in fairly rapid succession. She is 18 years old, and she has left for college, and this is exactly what was supposed to happen. I am 60 years old, and I have been working toward this moment, toward raising a person capable of leaving, since before she was born, since the years when Thomas and I talked about whether and when, since the first understanding of what parenthood requires, which is the systematic cultivation of someone else's independence at the expense of your own comfort. I knew this. I had known this. I still stood in the doorway for approximately 20 minutes. Thomas found me there eventually. He stood behind me. We looked at the room together. He said, "She took the wrong umbrella." I said, "I know." He said, "She'll be fine." I said, "I know." He said, "You're allowed to miss her." I said, "I know that too." He put his arm around me. We stood in the doorway of her room with its biology textbook and its unmailed letter and its Beatles record on the turntable. This room full of evidence of the person we had spent 18 years making. And I thought, this is what it cost, and this is what it produced. And both of those things are exactly right. Then I went to Manny's. As I mentioned, Manny's does not go broke. Manny's simply continues. When the city is going broke and the subway is covered in paint, and a president has resigned, and a war has ended badly, and your daughter has taken the wrong umbrella to college, the coffee is still right. There is something to be said for things that simply continue. I told you Elise died in 1973. I have been not talking about Elise for most of this episode, in the same way I didn't talk about Jack in the 1965 episode. The way you don't talk about certain things when talking about them makes them more present in a way that is not yet the presence you want them to have. But it's October now, and October is the month when she died. A Wednesday in October 1973, in her studio, of a cardiac event that her doctor had been warning her about for 2 years, and that she had absorbed with the equanimity of a person who had decided that 2 more years of living as herself was worth whatever it cost. She died in her studio, standing in front of a canvas, or sitting. The specific circumstances are not entirely clear to me, because I was not there, and the person who found her was the building superintendent, who was not equipped by training or inclination to reconstruct the precise choreography of those last moments. What I know is that she was in the studio, and she was there alone, and the canvas she had been working on was unfinished. I have the canvas. Her building superintendent called me. I was the name she had given, the person to contact, not because I was her closest remaining family. Her parents were gone. Her one brother lived in California and came for the service, and was sad and slightly lost and left again. But because I was, in the vocabulary of whatever paperwork she had filed, the person who would know what to do. I didn't entirely know what to do. I went to the studio. I stood in front of the canvas. I looked at what she had been working on. It was blue. The way Elise's blues always were. Not the blue of the sky or the blue of water, but some interior blue. Some blue that lived underneath the visible world rather than on its surface. And there was something in the lower right corner. I use the word something deliberately, because it resisted more precise description. Something warm. An indication rather than a statement. The suggestion of heat, of color about to happen, of a painting that knew where it was going and had been interrupted before it could arrive. I took the canvas home. It is in my bedroom. It is the last thing I see when I go to sleep, and the first thing I see when I wake up. And this is exactly where it belongs. Elise believed that painting was evidence. Evidence that someone was here, that they saw something. That seeing was itself a form of proof. That the thing seen existed and was worth the attention required to see it properly. The unfinished canvas is evidence of Elise. Evidence that she was here. Evidence that she was in the middle of something. Evidence that the middle is where she wanted to be. At 50, I told you that the interesting work is what remains, that the accumulated material of experience has been sorted into what actually matters. At 60, the sorting has continued. What I know at 60 that I did not know at 50 is this. The things that make a life are not the large events. The large events are the structure, the deaths and the achievements and the crises and the departures. But the life itself is made of smaller things. The specific quality of the Tuesday morning light in October in New York. The way Thomas's handwriting has changed since I first saw it in 1952. More deliberate now, as though the hand has decided to mean each letter individually, rather than producing them in the collective rush of youth. The way Clara's voice sounds on the telephone when she is happy, which is the sound of a person who has discovered that she is capable of being happy away from home, which is exactly the discovery I wanted her to make, and which makes me, when I hear it, simultaneously proud and bereft in the specific proportion that parenthood seems to require. The taste of the coffee at Manny's, which is unchanged from 1947. I have ordered this coffee for 28 years. I have ordered it in grief and in joy and in boredom and in the heightened awareness of someone who has decided to pay attention to everything. I have ordered it the morning after Thomas and I had an argument, and the morning after we had resolved it, and on mornings that were neither. I have ordered it on the days when the work was going well, and on the days when it wasn't, and on the days when there was no work to assess. I have ordered it without fail, reliably, on Tuesdays and Saturdays, and occasionally Thursdays, for 28 years. The coffee is always right. I think about this, about the reliable rightness of this one thing in a world that has produced, in 28 years of Tuesdays, everything from the Dodgers winning the World Series, to a president resigning, to Vietnam ending on a rooftop, to my daughter leaving for college with the wrong umbrella, to Elise dying in her studio in front of an unfinished canvas. The coffee is always right. I don't think this is a small thing. I think this is... I keep coming back to the word reliable, which sounds modest but is actually enormous. What is reliable? What can you count on to be itself, consistently, in the way you need it to be? The list is shorter than you think, and it gets shorter as the years accumulate, and the things on it become more precious in proportion to their rarity. This corner table. This cup. The light that comes through the window at this hour. These are mine. They have been mine through everything. I cannot in good conscience conclude 1975 without telling you about disco. Disco is not yet at the height it will reach in 1977, when Studio 54 opens and the whole thing peaks and then, in 1979, collapses in a moment of spectacular backlash that contains its own interesting sociology. In 1975, disco is still building. It is in the clubs, it is on the radio, it is in the specific way that people on certain dance floors, in certain neighborhoods of certain cities, are moving their bodies in response to music that is structured for exactly that purpose. I want to tell you what disco sounds like from the outside, as someone who is 60 years old and whose primary musical formation happened during the era of jazz. It sounds like someone decided that the function of music was not to be listened to, but to be lived inside. I mean this as a precise description, not a criticism. Jazz asks you to pay attention. The complexity is in the listening, the improvisation, the conversation between instruments, the things that happen in the space between the notes. You bring your mind to jazz. Jazz works on your mind. Disco asks something different. Disco asks your body. The 4-on-the-floor beat. If you don't know the term, it simply means a bass drum on every beat, 4 beats per measure, steady as breathing. The 4-on-the-floor beat is specifically designed to synchronize with the human heartbeat, to enter the body at the level of pulse rather than at the level of attention. You don't listen to disco in the way you listen to jazz. You receive disco, and your body responds to it, and the response is movement. I went to a disco once. This is perhaps the most surprising sentence in this entire account, and I want to give it a moment to land. I went to a disco once. It was in 1974. Thomas and I were at a dinner party, a slightly chaotic dinner party, the kind that starts with 8 people and somehow acquires 4 more before the main course. And afterward, because it was a Friday night and we were in the company of people who were slightly younger than us and had more energy and fewer reasons to be home early, We ended up in a club. The music was loud. The light was complex in the specific way that mirrors and colors and rotating fixtures create complexity. The room was full of people who were moving in the specific way of people who have agreed, collectively and without verbal negotiation, that this room is for this only. For this pure, unqualified, socially sanctioned moving of bodies to music in the company of other bodies moving to music, for no other purpose, without any requirement to justify or explain or produce an outcome. I danced for approximately 45 minutes. Thomas danced with me for approximately 20 of those minutes, and then retreated to a bar stool with the expression of a man who has fulfilled his social obligations with good humor and is now entitled to observe. The 45 minutes I am telling you about, I am 60 years old. I am an actress and a writer and a teacher, and a woman who has been taking herself seriously since approximately 1941. I have feelings about art and about craft and about the relationship between them. I have things to say about disco that are complicated and that do not simply endorse it. And I danced for 45 minutes without thinking about any of that. Just moved. In response to a beat that was asking my body to move, and to which my body, which had been carrying a year's worth of Watergate and Vietnam and fiscal crisis and Elise's death and Clara's growing up, was grateful to respond. There is something to be said for this. I am saying it. That is 1975. The city going broke and the Bronx burning, and a war ending on a rooftop, and a president who said always when he meant something else entirely. The Pet Rock, which sold 1.5 million copies because people needed something to laugh about, and the graffiti on the subway cars, which is what happens when a city abandons its young, and its young respond with color. Clara going to college with the wrong umbrella, and Elise's unfinished canvas on the wall of my bedroom. Saturday night on NBC, and 45 minutes of dancing, and the specific democracy of a disco beat that doesn't ask your credentials before it asks your body to move. A hard year. An honest year. The year that stripped certain things down to what they actually were. And in the stripping, a clarity. The clarity of a city that can no longer afford its illusions. The clarity of a country that has finished a war it couldn't win, and elected, and then watched resign, a president it couldn't trust, and is now, in the specific, exhausted, clear-eyed way of a person who has been through too much to be easily fooled anymore, beginning to figure out what comes next. I don't know what comes next. I never do, from inside the year. Come back in 10 years. In 10 years, a man named Ronald Reagan will be president of the United States, and the city will have survived its bankruptcy and become something different, something more expensive and less forgiving, and in certain specific ways, more beautiful. In 10 years, there will be a disease that nobody has named yet, moving through the city in ways that nobody has yet understood, and it will begin to take people I know, and I will watch the government's response to it with an anger I have not felt about domestic policy since the fires in the Bronx. In 10 years, I will be 70 years old. In 10 years, Clara will be 28, and she will have a husband. And in 10 years, 2 months and 3 weeks after the decade begins, I will hold my first grandchild in my arms. His name will be Daniel. Come back in 10 years. I'll tell you why.